Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the show. It's your host, Danny Haifong. I'm in Hangzhou, China, and I am still doing daily updates, this time with returning friend of the show and regular guest, Larry Johnson. Thanks, Larry, for having coming on this show.
Ooh. Hey, thanks for having me. Sorry, my dog's barking at a delivery boy.
That's all right. Everybody hit the like button as you come on. That helps boost the stream. I want to get started with you, Larry. We are in day 4 of this blockade announced by the Trump administration via the U.S. Navy. And the latest news is that during this time, Iran has basically hit back really hard in the form of not capitulating to this blockade. It's shipped 9 million barrels of crude, according to drop site news, in the Gulf of Oman since the blockade took effect. Yeah. And not only this, but there's more than 20 commercial ships that have passed through the Strait of Hormuz in just the last day. More than 800 ships remain stopped in the Persian Gulf as part of Iran's own control of the Strait of Hormuz. And China has essentially called Trump's bluff. Trump has said that this is all about China, the Trump administration, that they're trying to stop oil coming to China from Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. And China said they're just going to keep on going. They're going to keep meeting their arrangements. So where are we, Larry, in this? It seems like Donald Trump is panicking a bit with working really hard to, on the one hand, surge troops to the region, on the other hand, talking a lot about settling. So what's going on here?
Well, there's no strategy. So they keep changing, they're basically trying to get Iran to obey, and Iran refuses to obey. That's been sort of their military objective now. Get Iran to do what we tell them to do. Well, that's not happening. This is, if you will, Iran is now the adult. They're no longer a child. They're no longer dependent upon you in any way whatsoever. And so they've realized that, you know what, I'm on my own. I'm making my own money. And so I'm going to live my life as I see fit, to put it in like human terms. Any son that's ever been in confrontation with their father and is, where the father says, do it my way or get out of the house. Well, okay, the guys get out of the house and go on and have their own life. So what's taking place here is the failure to appreciate the world has not yet experienced the pain of losing 20% of the supply of oil. And what I mean by that is, let's go back to February 28th. On that date, when the war started, there were ships that were loaded with oil that started to sell out of the Strait, out of the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. Those ships are just now arriving at their destination ports around the world, because those oil tankers don't sail real fast, about 200 miles a day. And if you're selling 5,000 miles, just do the math. It's going to take you, it'll take you 5 days to go 1,000 miles. It'll take you maybe 25, 30 days to go 5,000 miles. So the world has not yet begun. There's only now starting to actually experience what a shortage, 20% decline in oil supply means. And in many countries, it's shortages. They're running out of supply. And they can't just turn around and say, oh, well, we'll just get it from some other place. There is no other place to get it. Or if there is an alternative place to get it, the price is going to go up because you've got reduced supply, lots of demand. So, it is, if you're, it's like if you're the only girl on a desert island with 5 guys or 10 guys or 20 guys, you get to pretty much be in charge and demand of what you want in terms of having a partner. So that effect is now coming into the oil market, and so that's now going to have an increased depressing effect on the global economy across the board, because the price that people pay for fuel, it's going to continue to go up. I saw the report yesterday on oilprice.com said that a ship that had arrived in Singapore, the price per barrel coming off of that ship was $210 a barrel. Unbelievable, but they need it. We see these guys in the oil futures market saying, "Oh yeah, $90, $95." They're kidding themselves, because let's say that they got the war stopped today, that United States and Iran say, "Hey, okay," and Israel, "Well, we're sorry. Let's all kiss and make up. Now everything's gonna flow naturally." It's still gonna be 3 months before you'd get supplies back to where they were on February 27th. That's number one. Number two, this blockade that the United States has put up, it's a facade. It's a joke. It's not real. It is being presented as such to the American people. They're being gaslit about it. And they're being told, "Oh, yeah, we're doing this and turning these ships away, and we're going to crush the Iranian economy." Let's look at, we do have a case study of a blockade against a country where the United States was really in a position to control what could get in and out. That would be called Cuba. Now, Cuba does not have the advantages that Iran does. Cuba is an island. It doesn't have some friendly countries on its neighbors and borders that it can actually get goods smuggled in and also shipped out. They're on the Caspian Sea. They can actually ship oil up into Russia. They can work out a swap with Russia. So Russia sends out its oil, and then Iran supplies what Russia sent out for it. And we've been at that blockade business with Cuba now for 66 years, and it hasn't worked out real well. I mean, the Cubans have suffered. They've suffered economically, no doubt about it. But again, they didn't have the kind of alternatives that Iran has. So this is just one more act of desperation by the Trump administration, who thought that they could start. Trump decided he could start a war. It'd be over in 3 days because the Israelis told him so. It turns out the Israelis lied.
Yeah, those are all great points. And to the point about the blockade on Cuba, it's much tighter now, even under the Trump administration. And we saw just recently a Russian tanker pass through that blockade and be able to dock itself and transfer much needed energy resources, oil, to Cuba, signaling that there are conditions to these blockades, Larry. And it seems like one of the big ones is, especially when it comes to China, the target, it seems, of Scott Besson's fantasies with the Iran blockade. It's this notion that no matter how much the United States says it wants to contain and target countries like Russia and China, when it comes to confronting them, it's much easier said than done. And I think that's what we're seeing really in this blockade, which is why China is not only continuing to do what it's doing, but it's also very vocal about not only its condemnation, but the dangers of continuing on this path, given also that Iran has just said, and this is, I think, big, that if this continues, it's not clear how long Iran will tolerate this. But they said Red Sea, Gulf of Oman, the Gulf of Oman, the Persian Gulf, it's all ships there, U.S. ships, U.S.-related ships, they're all up for targeting if this continues.
Yeah, well, number one, look at the inconsistency in the U.S. stance. When the Iranians first installed their chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz, Trump's initial reaction was, "Okay, well, we don't care because we don't get anything out of there. Let the Europeans worry about it." Then all of a sudden, getting it open was urgent. A week ago Sunday on Easter, the Western Easter, Trump had that profane outburst. He dropped the F-bomb and was calling them crazy assholes, and so he seemed really keen on getting, because we got to have the strait open. And then this week, so we got to have the strait open so bad, we're going to blockade it so it's closed. and you're going, huh? Let's follow that line. So this is a unique logic that Americans have applied in conflicts historically. In Vietnam, we've got to destroy the village in order to save it. And now we've got to blockade the strait in order to open it. Oh my God. This is Monty Python Black Knight territory. You know, the Black Knight was the one that he was fighting and he kept losing his limbs. One arm was gone, then the next arm was gone, then a leg gets chopped off, then both legs. And so he's laying there on the ground. He's basically like the third bag on a baseball diamond, and still threatening to fight, completely incapable of fighting. And so here's the United States making threats, but it can't deliver on them because these ships, they're parked so far offshore that it's very difficult both to locate, identify, and track vessels. It's difficult unless you have tagged a vessel with, you know, some sort of electric transponder, or if they have, you know, like the equivalent what the airlines have, identify friend, foe, you know, emits a signal. You can't just tell who owns the ship and what it's doing unless you can visibly see the flag. And we forget how much territory this part of the Arabian Sea leading into the Indian Ocean. It's big. It's not small. It's big, and we don't have enough ships to actually cover the area because you know, I use the analogy of the pizza. So take a pizza. You got that circle. Put your finger in the middle. Okay, that's the point. Let's say that's the point of the Strait of Hormuz. Then as you come out and get out to the crust, well, when you get to the crust, it's pretty wide. It's not safe. And that increased area as you move farther away. Well, the ships have to move farther away because if they're close in, Iran has what are called coastal defense cruise missiles. They also have short range ballistic missiles that can then hit those ships. They've got underwater drones. They've got surface level drones that come on to run on top of the water, and they've got drones in the air. So they have several threat vectors that can be launched from within, you know, say 50 miles inside Iranian territory or farther. So those ships, they've got to back out because if they get in close, they're going to be sunk. And that's was inherent in this threat that they made. Notice what the United States is doing real world with they deployed the George H.W. Bush. It's heading there to battle. We're the mighty U.S. Navy. We're at sea. And it sailed across the Atlantic and got to the Straits of Gibraltar and had to make a choice. Do we go into the Mediterranean Sea, then down the Suez Canal into the Red Sea and sail down through the Red Sea through the Strait, Bab al-Mandab? Or do we sail around Africa so we don't run the risk of getting sunk in the Red Sea? Well, they opted for B, not A, which tells you everything you need to know. The United States, at least the people doing the planning for that voyage, at least they're not insane, because they knew that if they got into the Red Sea in this certain circumstance, that the odds that aircraft carrier would have got out, slim.
Yeah, and you know, Larry, I know you recently had you just published an article. Watch what Trump does, ignore what he says. More war on the agenda. You know, it seems like a lot of these moves. You said no strategy. It also seems like they're born out of a sense of panic because of limited options and bad choices for the U.S. empire. But maybe talk about more war on the agenda, because there are troops, thousands, 10,000 more that are heading to the region. And some, I think you were just on Daniel Davis's show, have pointed out that they've been told that yeah, the United States is still very much gearing up for a kinetic war, even in ground operations. So your thoughts on this and how it connects to this blockade, because this blockade is what everyone is seeing right now, and there might be other things underneath it.
Yeah, and so we've heard Trump. He's been all over the board. He said, "Oh, the war's over, or it's almost over, but there's going to be another uptick, and then it's going to be over." And you're going, "Okay, which is it?" So I say, what is he actually doing? Is he stopping the deployment of troops? Is he calling troops home, or is he sending more troops? He's sending more troops. Are the flights, are there empty flights headed over and then bringing people and things back? Or are those flights increasing and arriving with and unloading more material and more personnel? Well, it's the latter. So that tells me that we're gearing up to continue fighting, even though we've had this as of Monday. That will be a 2-week pause. Can't believe how fast time is flying by here. But this ceasefire between Israel, the United States, and Iran went into effect Tuesday night, a week ago Tuesday. And that was in response to negotiations that were carried out with Trump had put J.D. Vance in charge of it. And Vance had agreed, but he'd shared it with Trump. Trump had signed off on it. The Iranian demand, they said, look, okay, we'll agree to a ceasefire and then negotiations. But those negotiations, we start from the premise that you're going to withdraw your troops. You're going to get a ceasefire between, it's not just with us, but also with Hezbollah and Israel, that shooting and killing, that stops, that our assets are unfrozen, that you ease all sanctions, etc. So that was in place until Israel sabotaged it and refused to have a truce with Hezbollah. Now, that right there, what's going on between Israel and Hezbollah, that's the critical battle right now. Israel's trying to take this one town in southern Lebanon, and Hezbollah won't give it up. They keep fighting. They keep inflicting casualties on the Israelis, and so far Israel showed no sign of giving up. But I think if Israel continues to suffer losses like it has been, they will agree to a ceasefire with Hezbollah within a couple of weeks. So when that happens, then we'll actually be in a position to potentially move forward towards a negotiated settlement. It's not one that's going to make the neocons happy, and it's not one that would make the Zionists happy, but there is a way for Trump to get out of this. And the essence of that deal is, I call it a resurrected JCPOA, modified in that the previous JCPOA had a time limit of, say, 10 years. This one would have no time limit. It would be seen as a permanent agreement that Iran would agree permanently never to build a nuclear weapon, and on top of it, to limit the enrichment of uranium. Trump could get that and then sell. See, our war has been worth it. We've made all this expense, but we've secured nuclear peace in the Middle East. Now, what do you have to cover up and sort of, eat is the fact that U.S. presence in the Persian Gulf has been basically erased, and the U.S. Stature in the Persian Gulf among the Gulf Arabs has been severely tarnished. That we'd vowed to protect them, and it turns out we can't protect them. We're incapable of protecting them, and our weakness has been exposed. So before we get to that point, I think Trump is, when this ceasefire, it ends, I believe, on Monday. That's the end of the 2-week period, or sometimes say noon Tuesday. Then I think the United States is I know Danny Davis has heard from 4 different sources, and it wasn't all, they weren't all talking to the same person and then repeating it, but that the plans are in place to launch major attacks on all of the nuclear sites and power plants in Iran, not understanding that the power plants is quite decentralized.
Right.
That and then Trump was going to be in a position to declare, oh, I've now decimated Iran. We win.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Sounds familiar. Wait, did it? Deja vu? Is this 7 months, 8 months ago?
Deja vu all over again, as Yogi Berra used to say. But
Holy
then we got word yesterday from a reliable source that that plan is now off the table. Instead, they're going to go after. They're looking at another special ops mission to go after and obtain the highly enriched uranium. That could end up in a disaster. And as that planning is moving forward on one track, you still have J.D. Vance working behind the scenes, trying to revive, go back to the talks, even though he's the one that walked out on them. But he walked out on orders basically from Trump, Susie Wiles, and Bibi Netanyahu. So we've seen a lot of movement by the Russians and Chinese in trying to help broker talks. The chief of staff of the Pakistani army, he showed up in Tehran yesterday. I guess he's old friends with Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister. Yeah, and you see him. They had a good man hug there on the tarmac, so you could tell these guys are bros, and not foes. And so if there's a new round of talks, it's likely to take place in, say, Russia, maybe China. China less likely, though, just because it's so far away, so tough, difficult to get there. I think Iran would be more comfortable flying in and out of Moscow. It'd be more difficult to try to assassinate them on a return visit, particularly if the Russians are flying them on a Russian-flagged airliner.
Yeah. I mean, this deja vu is absolutely incredible, Larry. And they're talking about ceasefire now. You mentioned Hezbollah. I don't know if you saw Trump's Truth Social post. This literally came right before the program. He announced that Lebanon and Israel are going to engage in a 10-day ceasefire brokered by him, or the Trump administration, him taking the credit. I'm curious, Larry, how you would see this development. If true, I believe it's mostly confirmed. It really is just a Truth Social post, though. If true, and given that there was a lot of consternation and criticisms even about the nature of these talks, Lebanese government directly with Israel, not involving Hezbollah necessarily, so it's hard to know what's going on. But if true, is this Trump now caving to this key demand finally after nearly the entire length of this ceasefire? What do you make of this?
No, I wish it was. I think it's just the opposite. To get a deal between Lebanon, or the government of Lebanon, and Israel is to convince the Lebanese government to start attacking Hezbollah. I think the vast majority of Americans really don't understand they don't recall the history of this entire sordid affair and the role the United States has played within Lebanon going back 51 years. That we've really helped exacerbate the situation, because the previously Lebanon it had 4 main groups in it. It had the Lebanese Christian, and I don't want to suggest that they were a monolith, because within any kind of religious, you get religious set of beliefs, you get dissidents and sectarian divisions. But you had the Christians, You had the Sunni Muslims, and then you had the Shia Muslims. And now, again, there are many in Islam who don't like that distinction. They say, hey, we're Muslims. We're not one or the other. But, the Sunnis in particular have been a problem over the last 50 years, and at least the extremists on that side, of stipulating that they are the ones who determine whether or not you're a good Muslim, which is why they frequently have been engaged with terrorist attacks against the Shia. And then you got the Druze. Well, in 1975, the Christians, a group called the Phalangists, which was a derivative out of the Roman phalanx, they attacked and ambushed a bus they killed 36 women, children. They were Shia Muslims. And that was like, that lit the fuse on the bomb that became the Lebanese Civil War. And that civil war continued for 15 years. And a lot of what we see today, these tensions that exist with the United States view of Hezbollah, the United States view of Iran, was all formed in the course of that civil war that took place in Lebanon, because Hezbollah was organized in 1982, and it was organized not because they said, oh, we hate those Americans because of their freedom. No, because we were aiding and abetting the Christians and aiding and abetting the Israelis, or the Zionists, I guess is a more accurate term. And they were killing Shia. So the Shia began fighting back, taking revenge. And they did it in a variety of ways. They attacked the Marine and French, the U.S. Marines and the French military that were deployed in Beirut, supposedly to help separate the fighters. But they were siding with the Israelis. And the U.S. was attacking Shia locations and killing Shia. So the Shia, they blame Iran for it, but I think, it wasn't Iran that did this, but it was Hezbollah or Amal. I've also, Alistair Crook emphasized he thinks it was more Amal. He had evidence for that. But they blew up the Marine barracks. Okay. Then Hezbollah, because remember, while this is going on, what's happening to Iran? The United States is funding Saddam Hussein, who's carrying out a war against Iran that's killing hundreds of thousands of Iranians. Saddam Hussein is given chemical weapons by the United States. Think of this. We give Saddam Hussein chemical weapons, and then 10 years later, we're wanting to go to war with Saddam because he's got weapons of mass destruction. Well, we gave him the goddamn things, for Pete's sake, So they're killing Iranians with that, and we're providing him actual financial support, and on top of it, we're giving him intelligence. We're giving him, this is where these Iranian units are located. This is where their stores are. This is where you need to attack. We were giving him actionable intelligence that Iraq was using. So naturally, Iran sees itself in a battle with the United States and is supplying and supporting Hezbollah, who's attacking back. And Hezbollah then starts kidnapping Americans. They first got a guy, the president of the American University in Lebanon, a guy named Danny Dodge, I think his name was. They held him for a while. Then he got traded for some weapons. They kidnapped William Buckley, the chief of station. And I believe that was like 1984. He was murdered. They got Rich Higgins, a U.S. Marine Corps officer who was with the UN. He was kidnapped. He was killed. And then they kidnapped a variety of journalist Terry Anderson, Reverend Benjamin Weir, Joseph Sicipio. I don't know why I remember some of these names, but I was involved at State Department on trying to secure the release of these people in 1989, 1990, 1991. Anyway, my point of this is, what we're seeing today within Lebanon, it comes out of that period. And also, let's just throw in one other thing. You want to talk about how absolutely batshit crazy U.S. policy has been. Remember now, We are supporting Iraq, funding Iraq to attack Iran. We are siding with the Israelis that are attacking these Shia Muslims. The Iranians are Shia. They're trying to support the Shia overseas. And then a guy named Oliver North shows up and starts selling weapons to Iran.
Yes.
So we're also, giving weapons to Iraqis. Now we're selling weapons to Iran, and our attitude is a bunch of ragheads. Let them all kill each other. We don't care. But then that was the whole Iran-Contra affair that erupted. Now, again, the 80s were really sort of a disaster, if you will. That placed a festering wound here in Lebanon, in Israel, in Iran, that today that festering wound has erupted and is causing sepsis to the body politic, to use the medical metaphor. So, I'm taking old guy liberty. It's important because all this was unfolding. You may not have even been born yet when this was taking place in the 1980s. So it's important that people understand the context out of which all of this has come. It's not just that, Hezbollah hates Israel because they just don't like Jews. No. It's a lot more complicated than that. And Israel has a good 40, if you go back to the Nakba, an over 70, almost 80-year history of killing Palestinians. And when people react to that and decide, you know what, we're going to seek revenge, and then we act surprised when they do so. That's what's crazy about this. So long and short of it is they announced a ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel. All that is a ploy to get Lebanon then to start attacking Hezbollah. The only way we'll know that we've actually made progress towards a potential peace settlement is when Israel agrees to a ceasefire with Hezbollah. Their cabinet met last night in Israel today's Thursday. It was late on Wednesday, Israeli time, to consider the ceasefire with Hezbollah, and they turned it down for now. Now, I believe that if they continue to suffer losses, which I think Hezbollah is quite capable of inflicting on them, that within about 2 weeks, Israel will be ready to entertain a ceasefire with Hezbollah, if for no other reason than just to stop the bleeding on their part.
Yeah, I mean, just before this Trump announcement on Truth Social, within the last 48 hours, the Lebanese government was giving indications that it was willing to have discussions, not even about a ceasefire, but about potential normalization, which is, I think, a great indicator of what you are saying here, Larry, about the dangers of looking at this with any credibility. Speaking of credibility, Pete Hegseth was up on the podium today, and he gave the typical "everything is destroyed, we're watching you, Iran, we'll destroy you even more if you keep doing what you're doing, building nuclear weapons, holding Strait of Hormuz hostage." There has been one thing, though, that the Fox News and other Western mainstream media have been making note of, is they keep saying that Iran is digging out missile launchers because they're so desperate to dig out the missile launchers from the rubble that the U.S. caused. What do you make of this? Because this, I can't. When I look at these videos, I can't pull them up here because I want to keep bandwidth low from where my location. But when I look at them, I'm just like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. And what's your assessment on this? Because many might believe or might take it that the ceasefire is about Iran's capabilities being diminished, and that's why it isn't firing back or even making good on its threats just yet to close the Red Sea or other waterways in response to this blockade.
Well, yeah. So let's just step back and look at facts. Look at what's happening. Iran has managed to control what ships go through the Strait of Hormuz because it has a variety of weapon systems that it has demonstrated it's willing to employ that has prevented the ships from wanting to test it. The United States has been unable to destroy Iran's ability to use those weapon systems. So as long as Iran continues to have, coastal defense cruise missiles, close range ballistic missiles, underwater drones, mini submarines, mines, surface level drones, aerial drones, then Iran will continue to control who gets in, who gets out of the Strait of Hormuz. And the United States has been unable and so far demonstrated lacks the military capability to change that equation. That's it. That's the fact. So the United States supposedly is concerned about, we got to open the Strait of Hormuz. It's critical. And so what's our solution? As we talked about it earlier, blockade. So, okay, to open the strait, you want to close it even further? Yeah, that's our plan. Oh, good plan, guys. Really keen. So it just highlights that there is not a military solution to this, or one that's on the horizon, despite all of the bombast and braggadocio coming out of Pete. I like that. They call him Keg's breath. I like that, because I think the man may have been hitting the adult beverage a little too frequently, and it's affected and impaired his judgment. But the Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed, or it's under the control of Iran, and Iran's not willing to relinquish that control, because it's now realizes, you know what? By controlling this, we get to have a say at the table. We get to go sit, we don't have to be at the kiddies table anymore. We sit at the adult table, and they have to talk to us because we control, we're controlling 20% of the world's supply of oil. We're controlling 25% of the world's supply of liquid natural gas. The same, so 35% of the world's fertilizer that they need. And so we're going to start seeing, we had disruptions in the markets, but we saw price rises for gasoline, but a lot of that was in anticipation of what's coming. We didn't really actually have the shortages because of the tankers were still on the high seas and so the last ones are now being unloaded. Now we're going to see the full weight of what happens when you take 20% of the oil off the market. What happens when you take 25% of the liquid natural gas? What happens when you take away 35% of the urea? What happens when the 40% of the helium is gone? That's critical for making so these cascading effects are now going to be felt. And then as that happens, I think we're facing a genuine disruption in the global food supply. And I base that, I'm basing it upon one anecdotal conversation, but I know that this is not atypical, that this applies across the board. My neighbor, he's got a cattle ranch here in Manatee County, Florida. And he was commenting, he says, right now he's got it paying $2 more per gallon for diesel, which, when you go from paying $3.50 to $5.50, that's a significant jump. That's almost 100%. He's paying triple the amount for fertilizer. And here in Manatee, because we've had, and Florida's actually had a bit of a drought this the last year, he has to buy more hay bales to feed his cows. Well, he said, a year ago, I was paying $40 per bale of hay. And he says, now I've got to pay $90. But he said, last year, I only needed 40 bales. He says, now I need almost more than double that. I need about 90, or let's put it as 100. So all of a sudden, his costs for feeding the cows has gone from $1,600 to $9,000. So, you know, and he says, look, we're running in the red, which means they may have to sell off the cows, or it means, so they sell off the cows. There'll be an initial depression in the price of meat, temporary relief for consumers, but then no more cows. So these effects are going across the world. It's not just in the United States. It's in Asia, it's in Africa, and it's in Europe. And so that's where the economic consequences of having closed the Strait of Hormuz is just now starting to be felt. Before, there was anticipated what the damage was, but now it's going to be felt, and it's going to be incredibly disruptive. And it could be something as large as, if not worse than, the global depression that ravaged the world in the 1930s.
Yeah, yes, I believe wholeheartedly that that's where the world economy is headed. And what's also striking, Larry, about this posture and these actions taken by as our friend Pepe Esper calls it, the empire of chaos, is that just take the situation with oil and how the Trump administration, for now, since really the beginning of really asserting any kind of foreign policy, has really targeted oil and has used blockades and all of this as a supposedly a negotiating chip or a prelude to war, what have you. But now you have a situation where the primary target, China. I was just talking to Professor Zhang Weiwei, who I know you've met, and if people can watch that interview after. It is up. I streamed it earlier today, and he reminded all of us that despite all of the, as you call it, brigadacio against China around this blockade, China is 85% energy self-sufficient, and Iran makes up about 10 to 15% of its total oil imports, which makes up just a fraction, of course, of that 15% where it is energy dependent, which means that China will be okay. And then there's the, as you just put it, the consequences for the blockader. So the blockade, and then what are the consequences for you over this period, which, given Trump's behavior, you know, I put in the title Trump Panning, his behavior seems to give off needing to do something quickly. This can't go on for weeks and weeks and weeks because of those consequences. So your reaction to this, because I think that there is such a level of it's not even hubris. It's like this attempt to put on the empire's clothes, but they're all kind of off. It's to concealing the reality, and it's just inconcealable at this point.
Yeah, part of it's I can identify with how the United States has overestimated its influence and its ability to exercise leverage over China or over Iran. I was doing product counterfeiting investigations in Panama 25 years ago, and this one business owned by the Blockade family, and the youngest guy, but he was sort of an up and comer, the guy named Naval Blockade. And so I went and sat down with him, and I thought I was going to be the tough guy. That, listen, Naval, we got you now. You're counterfeiting all this Sunbeam, Oster marks, and so I can make life real difficult for you. I mean, I can go to the embassy, and you'll never get another visa. And and he laughed at me, pulled his drawer open, and he had an EU passport. He had a passport to Colombia. He had a Canadian passport. And basically is like, you're threatening me with that. I got other options. And, that was a humbling experience for me. I learned something from that. And that's what the United States hasn't learned. It's making those same kinds of threats, only on a global scale, and without realizing that Iran and China, they got other options. And the West may be assuming that all we got to do is just squeeze Iran. We got them blockaded, man. There are guys writing this kind of analysis. Their economy's gonna collapse within weeks. And you're going, yeah, really, are you people this stupid? Look, we've blockaded Cuba for 66 years. And we've got every advantage there. Cuba's an island. They don't have other alternatives. Mexico could supply them, but still that blockade has not broken Cuba. And Cuba it's not sitting there on a pile of oil and liquid natural gas. It's got great cigars, good bananas, mangoes, sugar cane, good rum. But that's about it. It's not rich in other natural resources. Whereas Iran's not an island. Iran, with the Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan off to the northeast, they got the Caspian. They can get to Russia. So they got a lot of other options. They're not just confined to what goes in and out of their ports in the Strait of Hormuz or north of the Strait of Hormuz, but they've also got other ports that are on the southern coast. And the fact of the matter is the United States does not have enough ships to cover all of that. We're telling the American people, oh, that's the case. Yeah, boy, we got them. We don't have them at all. And, Iran's going to, they're developing more confidence as they go along. Plus, they're getting more and more assistance from China and from Russia. And you made the most important point, Danny, that China is not dependent. We're treating China like if we cut off that Iranian oil, China's going to be screaming. No, they're not. They got other alternatives, for God's sake. Will it cause a little bit of disruption? Yeah, but not as much as we're going to experience when the Chinese fully cut us off from rare earth minerals.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Larry, it's like Iran has only been sanctioned since 1979, and
any minute now it's going to kick in. Any minute, just wait.
It's like it's not like China's a stranger to U.S. aggression and posturing, and especially, and it's not like it's not observing what the U.S. has done to every oil-rich nation in the world. It's almost as if the U.S. is assuming that these countries are not preparing for the maybe the most basic contingency of all is if you're being attacked economically, or if you see some of the most important energy-wielding countries just trying to exercise sovereignty be attacked, then you might want to figure out how to survive and maybe even continue on your path of development despite these things. And it seems like the U.S. is just not realizing this. I mean, Iran not preparing for something like being cut off economically in any way would just make Iran stupid. And that's just not the reality at all. That would make the entirety of the Iranian political system and its people for letting it happen absolutely brain dead.
It's one thing to talk about, an economic catastrophe, but I've lived through one in Argentina back in 1984, when they had one of their periods of hyperinflation, where the price it went up 1,000%, and and that does it was in some ways it was catastrophic for certain segments of the economy. A lot of people who were middle class, upper middle class, they were just devastated by it. I mean, they lost income, they lost homes. But the thing that was sort of odd, during that entire period, life still went on. The restaurants were still open, car dealerships. My wife and I lived there with our son at the time got 3. We bought a car. We lived with an Argentine family, a baker, his wife and 2 daughters, and so like I'd take him out to dinner. And at the time, the dollar was king. So we could go to an Italian restaurant, 4 adults and 3 kids. And the girls were, Beto's daughters were, they're old enough that they could eat a good portion. And we'd buy I could buy an Italian meal for everybody for $14 total. I mean, so hey, dollar is king. No, I'm just saying that the West, the politicians in Washington in particular, fail to understand that even in these chaotic, catastrophic economic circumstances, life still goes on, and people usually find a way to work it out, work around it. I mean, just look at what's Cuba's a living laboratory of that. After 66 years of sanctions, of being cut off, being deprived, being, with the West trying to strangle it economically, the Cubans, they're still alive. They're still, they're living without some things, but that's starting to turn around now, because I think with Russia and China, their patience is exhausted with the United States, and so now they're going to bring Cuba into BRICS, and Cuba is now going to have some alternatives that there will be investment in the United States attempt to impose a stranglehold. That's going to break, and let's assume that Trump is crazy enough that, okay, we're going to send U.S. military forces into Cuba to, quote, take it over. There will be Cuban insurgents that will continue to attack and kill Americans, and there won't be a damn thing we can really do about it other than try to kill the Cuban people, which then we're creating more war crimes.
Yep.
This is the United States has got to stop. We've got to stop trying to militarize the world and destroy people.
Yeah. How did it work out for the United States pre-1959 when they backed Batista and all those crimes and attempting to, keep Cuba dependent on the U.S. and essentially colonized by the U.S. Didn't work out very well. And Cuba has survived too, Larry. The blockade is really bad now. And I know some people have just gone over there and observed it. But Cuba went through the special period after the Soviet Union fell, and that was an incredibly devastating period, similar to, if not worse, than what they're going through now. So, and despite attempts to build up an opposition in Cuba, it's very close to Iran in the sense that there really isn't a significant opposition in Cuba. It just doesn't exist. Whatever you may think of why that is, the reality is the reality, and it doesn't. So, you got a long, and wasn't there just, I don't know if you remember this, Larry, was it not a couple months ago, there was a boat that tried to approach some armed bandits or mercenaries. They tried to approach, and Cuba just, they laid waste to them. I mean, they took them out pretty badly. Yeah.
These were some Cuban exiles living in Florida, and they decided they'd bought up a bunch of weapons, and we're going to go in and, let's call it Bay of Pigs 2. Bahía de los Cochinos número 2. Yeah, cochinos, cochinitos,
Yeah.
But actually, one of the things I learned while living in Honduras years ago was in certain parts of Caribbean, Central America, the Latinos there, they have names for pigs like Eskimos have names for snow. The Eskimos have like 20 different names, 30 different names for snow. Same with, pigs, cerdos, cochinos, puercos, it's just pretty funny.
That is funny. That is funny. Yeah. So it's a long uphill battle with even Cuba. So, and as you said, the United States, it won't come under a political regime like Trump and the GOP. And it likely won't, and it definitely won't come under the Democrats, who we know just have a different kind of obsession with Russia and a new Cold War on Russia and China. But nevertheless, I think what we're seeing more and more now is, and I've been saying that we're kind of in this moment in history where every time the empire of chaos, as our friend Pepe calls it, moves forward on anything, any war that it wants, any next step forward in this attempt to slay every single alternative to it, it comes back really hard against it. That there's no way the U.S. cannot experience consequences which make even just engaging in it, in whatever we're talking about, whether it's Iran or the Ukraine, etc., that it just makes it almost impossible to engage in a serious way that will affect outcomes. But I'm curious on what you think of this,
Yeah,
and
well,
how it shapes things in the future.
I would argue that one of the reasons the United States has been so quick to engage with regime change and destabilizing other governments and starting wars around the world is, more often than not, it's been profitable. It is not damaged or cost the United States much. I mean, even the Vietnam War. Now, so we say, oh, we lost 58,000. Yeah, we lose that, that was over a period of about 15, 20 years. Hell, we lose that many 1 year in traffic accidents. That's no big deal. You understand, I'm being sarcastic. But the fact is, it wasn't really that costly in terms of human life. For those who lost loved ones in it, there's no price you can put on it. It's immeasurable. But from the government standpoint, the vast electorate, who gives a crap? And the same with, we invaded Iraq. What, 4,000 people dead? No big deal. Yeah, so there were tens of thousands that were wounded. Some, who lost limbs, and the traumatic brain injury, and some are committed suicide. But that's not that many. But look at, the corporations did well. Now, because of the Vietnam War, we basically broke the dollar as the gold-backed dollar at the time, and then it became oil-backed. We shifted, back to Saudis. We turned the petrodollar on. Gold was locked away. So it's had economic consequences, and so far we've been able to avoid having to actually pay economically for our profligacy, the profligate spenders that we are. And, now those chickens, as they say, chickens may be coming home to roost, that the economic chaos that's going to, I believe, will sweep the world is the financial markets, the Western financial interests have not prepared for it. Because they've assumed, it can't be that bad. That won't happen. We've always found a way out in the past. We may have actually finally entered a territory that there is no way out. Just like what happened to the Soviet Union when it collapsed in 1991. All of a sudden, everything that people had counted on, depended on, disappeared. And there were a new group of people that became wealthy out of that collapse. And but you look at what Russia endured from 1991 until, say, 2000. During that period, the life expectancy of men dropped dramatically from like mid 60s to mid 50s. Yeah. Number of suicides went way up. Alcoholism was a problem. I mean, it was just it had devastating effects on the society. But I like to point to that period. It's a recent example in history, because out of that nightmare, that darkness, Russia was resurrected. And I'm not in the Putin fan club per se, but you know what? There's a part of me that says, God sent Vladimir Putin to save Russia, because when you go visit Russia today, just 26 years later since, Putin took office in August 9th, 1999, and here we are approaching the 27th anniversary of that. Trump talks about making America great again. Well, Putin has made Russia great again, genuinely so. And just the culture, the people, the architecture, the environment, Russia's firing on all cylinders. It's a place where you can take you would want to raise a family. It's a country with a very firm, clear values. And to be a country that's multi-ethnic, 145 different ethnic groups, and many with distinct languages, and yet Russia's figured out a way that they are nationalists. They love Russia, they love the motherland, and that there's, even though it's, quote, a Christian country founded on Christianity, the ancient Christianity, nonetheless living in harmony with Islam. You know, the Chechens, I was fortunate to meet during one of my visits, General Abdi Aladinov, a hero of Russia, a devout, just a great man, but an incredible soldier. And so, you know, when you see that, I sit there and say, whatever pain we're going to go through here in the United States, there's hope. There's light at the end of the tunnel. And no, it's not the onrushing train coming to run you over. It is actual daylight. There is a future that it can be achieved. But, you know, they had to do certain things. Putin did certain things. And one of it was he basically, he forced the oligarchs out of the political system. So could you imagine that happening here in the United States, where all these billionaires are forced out? They said, okay, you can go make your money. You know, we're still capitalists, but you're going to stop buying the election. You're going to stop selling America out to foreign governments. And that's, you know, it was a big problem in Russia were the Jewish oligarchs, the Zionists. You know, most of those, the majority of them held dual passports, Russian and Israeli. And so Russia figured out a way to deal with its Israeli problem, that Israel could not dominate its government the way it is dominating the U.S. government. And I think we're in the process of seeing the breakup of that relationship. We'll see.
Yeah, those are great points and a great place to close on, because it really does underscore the fact that even the biggest disasters and catastrophes born from, in part, Soviet Union was born from U.S. pressure. Also, there's a lot of internal issues and other factors. But no matter, you know, how much the U.S. wants or takes part in the destruction of countries, we see over and over again a pretty big response that can lead to very positive developments like Russia. And also now we're seeing countries like Iran and Russia and China and, you know, on and on, build up the capacity to defend themselves to the point where it's a new world, and we are living in it. And the Trump administration, the U.S. as an empire, it'll have to reckon with this at some point, and it won't be pretty. It'll be very painful for it. And so, great stuff, Larry. This was a great show. I want everyone to know that your sonar21.com blog is in the video description below. Everyone should check that out. Be sure to follow, subscribe, support, because your latest piece also is very good and really does summarize and elaborate on a lot of what you talked about today. Hit the like button before you go.
Let me ask you one question before you go.